well wishes in whatever our festive tradition may be, we share the beauty of the season by reaching out to the less fortunate. Please help us to help others with the KBLA Cover the Houseless Cozy Community Coat and Blanket Drive. All you have to do is drop off new or clean, gently used winter coats and blankets in the KBLA lobby during business hours, now through December 20th. All of the coats and blankets will be donated to unsheltered individuals and families experiencing houselessness. Simply bring your donation to 4434 Crenshaw Boulevard in Los Angeles, near Vernon Avenue, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays. That's 4434 Crenshaw in historic Leimert Park. During the holidays and every day, let's remember, we keep us safe. We keep us warm. We are the safety net, and together we can cover the unsheltered. Get caught up in the spirit of the season, the spirit of love. Make a difference with your friends at KBLA Talk 1580.
It's just me against the world. In the city, the cops are topping me. The project is full of bullets, no bodies is dropping. They ain't no stopping me. Constantly moving while making millions. Witnessing killings, leaving dead bodies in the abandoned buildings. Carries the children cause they're illin'. Addicted to killing and the appeal from the cap villain. Without feeling, but will they last or be blasted? Hard-headed. Maybe you're listening in this casket, the aftermath. More bodies being buried. I'm losing my homies in a hurry. They relocating to the cemetery. Got me worried, stressing my business blurry. The question is, will I live? No one in the world loves me. I'm headed for danger. Don't trust strangers. Put one in the chamber whenever I'm feeling this anger. Don't wanna make excuses, cause this is how it is. What's the use unless we're shooting? No one notices the youth. It's just me against the world, baby.
KBLA Talk 1580. Kind of feeling like that in this post-election season. Me against the world. Me and my community against the world. Happy to introduce now someone I haven't had the opportunity to talk to before. He's a full professor of political science and psychology at UCLA, where he directs its Race, Ethnicity, Politics, and Society Lab and co-directs its Intergroup Relations Lab. He draws on psychological principles to better understand the political attitudes and behaviors of racial and ethnic groups in the United States, especially people of color. Dr. Efrén Pérez, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I feel like your fingers are probably moving really, really fast on that keyboard since November 5th. I mean, this whole election is like a giant experiment on the psychology of political attitudes in America, is it not?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the way to view it is a lot of what we see manifest, and especially the more negative manifestations of the election, are a direction of what's offered and then how people sort of react to that.
We're getting a little bit of wooziness on your phone. I'm not sure if there's an adjustment that you can make, but yeah, I feel like this constant analysis that we're getting now, and everybody's pointing fingers at the Democratic Party and saying, "Oh, you guys need to make adjustments," and I feel like for me, there's almost like an avoidance of the elephant in the room, which is race and misogyny.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So, the election and the finger pointing, I think people forget that we changed candidates with about 3 months left in the election. And, for any normal election and for any sort of candidate, they typically have months and months to win over an electorate and rev up their enthusiasm. Kamala Harris had 3 months, and 3 months is just simply not enough, because I think most individuals forget that for the average American, whether they're white or not, politics is a sideshow. We don't start tuning in to what's happening politically really until September and October. So, I'm not saying that it was an unfair advantage. What I'm trying to say is that there's a very clear structural reason for why the election turned out the way it did. And it was, it was a high risk, but also high leverage move to try to change and substitute Joe Biden with Kamala Harris. And, the idea was it's going to pay off because the election is close. But the downside was always that there's just not going to be enough time to get her message out there and rev up her most staunch supporters.
And do you think, I don't know whether this is a psychological question or a political science question, but I guess for you, they're all both. Do you think that this move to the right, which is what we're hearing in all of the political spaces and all the chattering class, and it sort of shows up on the maps, do you think that is real, or do you think it, you know what I'm saying? Because if you're talking about, she had a 3-month window, but then all these other things, I'm in California, so I'm thinking of Prop 36 and the district attorney and the fact that we couldn't end prison labor and couldn't raise the minimum wage in a supposedly blue state. How do you see that?
Yeah, so I think the way to understand that, and a lot of what I'm saying here is backed by data-driven research, right? So it's not top of the head what I feel in my gut. This is sort of what research tells us. But, one way to understand how someone as well qualified and as accomplished as Kamala Harris loses so closely is to really step back and figure out what's been happening at the level of our party system, right? We have two parties. And, both parties recognize that the electorate is changing incredibly dramatically in terms of its demographics, right? And, this goes back to about the 1960s when both parties started to shift their positioning on the issue of race, right? Democrats saw an opportunity to shore up their massive Black support by championing civil rights planks. And if you look at the history books, Lyndon Johnson, the president back then, was quoted as saying, that with signing the Civil Rights Act, we're basically giving away white Southerners to Republicans for about a generation. And it's been longer than that. And the reason is that, we only have two parties. They overlapped in many ways. And so they decided that to differentiate themselves, Republicans were going to go the way of being the racially conservative party. And that's just to put it simply, because it's really the white ethnic party of the United States. And Democrats decided that their fortunes and their destiny was going to be with racial issues, right? So that's been evolving for at least 40 years now. And it was a dynamic that primarily affected white people, right? Where white people began to sort themselves into the appropriate camp, depending on whether they were racial liberals or racial conservatives. No one was paying attention to voters of color, at least not Latinos, at least not Asian Americans. And those trends have started to catch up with those communities as well. They only have a choice between two parties, and you have a non-trivial share, a small but non-trivial share of individuals within these populations that do have racially conservative attitudes for a variety of reasons. But the most fundamental reason has to do with race, right? We live in a highly stratified society still. We know that there's a pecking order. And within that structure, Asian Americans and Latinos have to figure out, do I want to go the way of African Americans and be their ally and address things like structural racism, et cetera, or is being a member of another marginalized group too heavy for me psychologically that I'm going to look for a sense of belonging outside of my racial or ethnic group? And so I go the way of Republicans. And that's what you're seeing. the reason it seems so surprising, I think, for a lot of individuals that some people of color could have right of center tendencies is that the center of gravity for these communities is still left of center. It's still pro-democratic, but there has always been anywhere from a quarter to 30% of Asian Americans and Latinos who have self-identified on purpose with the Republican Party. And now, when things go wrong, that smaller share of those populations become sort of the center of attention, right? But they've always existed. And I think the one thing that has changed is that you have had at least 2 times in the last 7 or so years a candidate who plays up those sort of darker aspects of people's human nature, which is, hey, I know that you all feel like you don't fully belong in the U.S., but guess what? If you're part of my coalition, you get to be part of the haters, right? Part of
you
the
get to be white. I mean, really, isn't that the message?
Yeah.
You get to be white. It's adjacency to
Yes.
whiteness. And you know, when we talked about this before, a lot of my delegation saying, well, why are all these Latinos, why are they checking the white box on the census? And my response to that is, well, if you thought that you could get treated with white privilege by checking a box, you probably would check it too. But at this point, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, a lot of us, you know, in the black community are like, well, F you guys then. Because it seems that immigrant groups, you know, Asian groups, Latino groups, they want the support of the civil rights movement. They expect us to stand in solidarity with them. And yet, doesn't seem to be reciprocated, at least not in this election.
Sure. So what I would say is that the people that you correctly identify that shun solidarity with other communities, such as African Americans, those people were never part of the team anyways, right? Mm-hmm. Sort of the drags that have limited how many gains these solidarity-based coalitions make. One thing I want to sort of go back to, you know, when we talk about whiteness, and this is sort of a confusion among researchers as well, we tend to think and find it puzzling when people with brown skin, with yellow skin, seem to manifest a lot of behaviors that say, like, they want to be white. I would urge your listeners to not focus so much on skin color as much as ideology. This is about worldview, a white-centered worldview. And what that means is that these individuals are not only all right, they are enthusiastically supportive of an ideology that says this group of people gets to have more power, more privileges, more resources than all these other groups that are quote unquote not white, not American, right? And so the lure here is not so much, oh, I can check the census form because, you know, technically I'm part Spanish, right? That's not what's at play. What's at play is an ideology. It's a way of seeing and explaining the world and anticipating changes. And so for a lot of Asian and Latino individuals, I think the burden of also a racially minoritized group is simply too much, right? When you are constantly the whipping boy in immigration debates, for example, even if you're not an immigrant yourself, right, you know that they're talking about a group that you are categorized into. And so for some individuals, it's just too much to bear. It causes loneliness. It causes, you know, declines in self-esteem, et cetera, et cetera. But I stress that is, you know, one section of these populations, with the overwhelming majority being Democrat and progressive. So I wrote a piece about this months before the election, that the real opportunity for the Democrats was to basically, you know, try to, you know, boost enthusiasm and mobilization of its primary supporters. And the way that Democrats have won elections in the last 20 years is to basically say, we'll get the white people that we get, but we got to top off Black voters, Asian voters, Latino voters. And we did not do that this cycle. But again, we had 3-month window. That is like such a tough errand to run politically, right?
Mm-hmm. Talking with Dr. Efrén Pérez of UCLA. He's a psychology and political science professor. You're listening to Unapologetically Progressive, KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
Did you know that 1 in 6 African American men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer? This month, every time you purchase Gillette's family of products, they'll donate to support Movember. Whether you're looking for Gillette's Best Shave, a regimen to help prevent new shave irritation and bumps, or award-winning beard care products, every Gillette purchase can make a difference in the fight against prostate cancer. Visit pggoodeveryday.com/Movember for details. Exclusions apply.
Here's another great reason to use the United States Postal Service this season. When sending a package, why venture outside? Ship with USPS for a true holiday ride. Want to stay cozy and warm? There's no need to roam. With free package pickup and labels printed from home. We have over 600,000 employees always in motion. And before you know it, your gift has delivered emotion. Spread the holiday joy this season with USPS's enhanced network. Learn more at USPS.com/holidayride.
As a mom, comforting my family is what I do best. Vicks Vapor Stick provides soothing, non-medicated Vicks vapors in an easy-to-apply stick. And it dries fast, so there's no mess. I use it to comfort myself and my family.
Thanks, Mom.
Vicks Vapo Stick, soothing comfort for the whole family. And when you need more comfort for yourself, try Vicks Vapo Shower Max for steamy Vicks vapors. Use as directed. Vapo Stick for use ages 4 and up. Vapo Shower Max use for adults only.
Hey, can you blow up some balloons for Jack's party?
I can't. I'm so congested.
You need Sinex Saline from Vicks.
Sinex Saline nasal spray?
Yeah, just Sinex. Breathe.
Sinex Saline instantly clears everyday congestion associated with colds and year-round allergies with a gentle, ultra-fine mist that's no mess and easy to control.
Daddy, we need more balloons.
On it.
Enjoy life's important moments without congestion. Try Sinex Saline from Vicks. Just Sinex. Breathe. Use as directed.
This is the story of the one who, as a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, knows that vintage charm historically needs constant attention. Which is why when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them. The right tools and supplies are never far away. So the one can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I occasionally have nerve discomfort in my hands, so the things I love to do...
Let's play something, Grandma.
...became difficult as I got older.
If you have occasional stabbing and burning in your hands and feet, try Nervive Nerve Relief. Nervive's clinically studied dose of alpha-lipoic acid reduces occasional nerve discomfort in as little as 7 days with continued daily use. Say yes to healthy nerves with Nervive Nerve Relief. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
And honored to be in conversation with somebody who seems to be perfectly well equipped for these times. He's a full professor of political science and psychology at UCLA. Directs its Race, Ethnicity, Politics, and Society lab and co-directs the Intergroup Relations Lab. You were talking, Dr. Perez, about this idea of ideology versus race. Can be a fine line, especially right now when you're dealing with the ideology of white supremacy. But I think it's a fair point. And I also think it goes to this idea about when we talk about Latinos voting for Trump, the president-elect, that's generic Latino, and the term Latino or Hispanic encompasses, I don't know how many countries, different political systems, different points of view, and different reasons why they would be in this country, right?
Yeah. So, I think there are a lot of legitimate complaints about whether we are sort of conflating different Hispanic groups with this, trend toward the right. If you dig into data, the way to view it is a big chunk of his Latino support came from the type of Latinos that were already pretty strongly identified as Republicans, and that's Cuban Americans, right?
Yeah.
This is sort of a trend that we've known about since the early days of polling on Latinos in particular. So that's part of the segment, okay? So that's not news. What about all these individuals that, the media or news reporters basically say, they basically, in the last 5 days before the election, they realized that the price of eggs was too high, and so they decided to vote for Trump. Now, I say that jokingly, but it's actually quite real, and here's the reason. As a voting bloc, Latinos in general tend to be what are known as low information, low propensity voters. What that really means is not that they're dumb. It's that they typically don't have the time, the resources to, find out every policy detail about candidates during an election. And this happens to a bunch of groups, right? But this is, since we're talking about Latinos in particular, it should not be surprising that individuals voted for a candidate without being fully informed, fully tuned in about the kinds of things that he promised to do. I mean, it's not like he was pulling a veil over us. He was actively telling us during the election, first day in office, I'm going to sign an executive order to deport people. Okay, so how do these Latinos wrap their minds around voting for this guy who is clearly anti-Latino, anti-Black, anti-anything that is not, a sort of typical white male? And I think the way that these individuals do this psychologically is, when he's talking about immigrants, he's talking about bad immigrants, right? I'm not a bad immigrant. And if you happen to be the child of immigrants like me, or the grandchildren of immigrants like my kids, those kinds of individuals that vote for Trump basically turn around and say, well, I'm not even an immigrant anymore, right? I'm actually born in the U.S., I'm here, and I don't want none of that nonsense of, being Latino and being progressive and et cetera. And this is how psychologically they rationalize their decision to vote for a candidate who supports policies that are going to harm their co-ethnics and other people of color. I mean, I think from a more general level, the way to really see this is some Latinos are telling people like us, people like you, who they really are in this fight system of race relations. Yeah. There's fully recognize that Latinos are pretty proximate to African Americans as a population in terms of life chances, right? In terms of any progress upward. And so what they're saying is there's got to be a better way. And I'm going to cast my lot with the guy who wants to keep all of these other groups in their place, because at the end of the day, I'm not really like them. I'm not really like them politically. I'm not really like them in terms of temperament. Whatever it is, they rationalize that decision to quote unquote turn against other people of color. But the thing I want to emphasize here is, it's not false consciousness. It's not like they were sort of duped into voting for this guy. They actively know what they are doing when they support a candidate like him. This sort of explains, how do you get Enrique Tarrio, a Black man who is a leader of the Proud Boys, a white supremacist organization.
I mean, he's a Cuban, right?
He's a Cuban, yes. But, I mean, the guy will tell you a bunch of fantastic explanations like, well, yes, I am African, but I'm also part Spanish because of the conquest. I mean, that's a pretty good stretch, right, for anyone. But what he is doing and what he is telling you, and what a lot of other Latinos like him are actually expressing to us is, you know what? This business of keeping other impertinent, uppity groups in their place, I want some of that. I want to be the kind of person that helps to enforce that sort of arrangement.
Right. I want to be part of the ruling class. I mean, I get that.
Oh, yeah.
I get that. How do you account for the the gap between Latino men and women.
Yeah, so the gap between Latino men and women, I think for me, the shift that you started to see, and it's actually just a trend at the moment, because what we need is sort of data that tracks these people over time to tell us how durable are these shifts in a pro-Republican way. But really what it comes down to is, these men have a high level of these dispositions that are into patriarchy, into misogyny, into racism. Like, you don't have to go look to Latin America to explain why they are the way they are. They pick up on that when they get here. They see, wow, white people are still sort of the more powerful group. African Americans, despite being here since the nation's founding, for some strange reason, haven't quote unquote assimilated. And my group is actually pretty close to them, right? And so, here's a candidate that's talking about being hostile to these other groups, keeping them in their place, et cetera. And these people have that kind of psychological temperament that lends itself to being hostile toward women, being hostile to the LGBTQ community, being hostile to African Americans, being hostile to their own co-ethnics. This is a psychological syndrome. We didn't see it before because we didn't have two candidates offering wildly different versions about race and the role of race in American society. And because you had Trump now run 2 times, it's been 2 times where those psychological dispositions get activated for some people of color too, Latino men in particular.
Ooh, a lot to unpack here. We're talking with Dr. Efrén Pérez, and boy, they're having a robust conversation in the YouTube chat. Dr. Pérez will address some of their questions when we come forward. They're talking about mis and disinformation. They're talking about the role of the press, and they're talking about one thing that's been a persistent conversation here. I'll love to hear your thoughts on it. A lot of folks think there was some cheating, some shenanigans, some fishy, shady business afoot during this election. Continue the conversation after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley criticized President-elect Trump's cabinet picks. The former presidential candidate spoke Wednesday on her SiriusXM show Nikki Haley Live, calling Tulsi Gabbard a Chinese sympathizer and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a liberal Democrat with no healthcare background. Ukraine claims Russia launched an intercontinental ballistic missile at Dnipro, but a Western official says it was a regular ballistic missile. The Ukrainian Air Force tracked the launch as an ICBM. Elton John's Tammy Faye musical, which opened last week, is closing on December 8th due to poor attendance and harsh reviews, including being called, quote, a disaster of epic proportions by the New York Post. And those buying wine for holiday gatherings can now pick up a bottle with a slice from Pizza Hut. The chain is launching a limited edition pizza wine with notes of tomato. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Lowe's knows you want to get even more value for the holidays. That's why, as a My Lowe's Rewards member, you get new member deals every week on holiday decor, tools, and more. Program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for full details. Subject to change.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The NFL said it has no issues with players doing the Trump dance to celebrate a touchdown or a big play. But the league had all sorts of issues with players kneeling during the national anthem 4 years ago to protest social injustices after George Floyd's death. With more players doing the Trump dance since he won the presidential election, the NFL was forced to respond on whether the dance is a violation of the league's celebration rules. The NFL said the Trump dance is not a violation because, in their view, the dance is not a political statement. When some players wanted to kneel during the national anthem to protest police brutality, it became a political statement. Fans, politicians, and some NFL owners said kneeling was disrespectful disrespectful to the U.S. flag and military. Trump was president when he called the players who wanted to kneel SOBs. It's obvious the NFL has its own definition of political statements. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Tips to help improve basic steps for building a budget in 2024. Building a budget can help you achieve and reach your financial goals. With a budget, you can keep track of your spending, avoid and get out of debt, limit overspending, pay bills on time, and build solid savings habits. What's the best way to get started? Figure out how much to set aside for expenses, like rent, mortgage, bills, groceries, and entertainment. Understanding your past financial habits can help you make the proper adjustments for your budget. Adjusting to a budget can take time as you work to find the right balance, but keep working on it. For more financial health tips, visit chase.com or stop by a local branch. This segment is sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase & Company.
Are you an entrepreneur looking to take your business to new heights? KBLA Talk 1580 is your partner in success. Every day, we celebrate and elevate Black-owned businesses across our community. Our KBLA SMB Marketplace currently features The Cookie Dip, Badass Bakes, Hair Concoction, Higher Education Accreditation Consulting, LACC Radiology Technology Department, and Malik Books. Your business deserves to be heard. Let KBLA Talk 1580 amplify your voice and connect you with our powerful community of listeners. Email smb@kbla1580.com today. That's smb@kbla1580.com. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Worried about eviction? You have rights, and Stay Housed LA can help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between LA County, the City of Los Angeles, and local service providers. From Lancaster to Long Beach, we're here to help you with tenant education workshops, legal clinics, free legal services for eligible tenants, and online resources about tenant protection laws. Don't face eviction alone. Call our hotline at 1-888-694-0040. That's 1-888-694-0040. Or visit stayhousedla.org. Stay Housed LA, keeping Los Angeles residents in their homes. Stay Housed LA, your rights, your home, our community. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We knew you'd stick around. This is LA's home for progressive talk radio. Be heard. Welcome back to KBLA Talk 1580.
And we're talking with Dr. Efrén Pérez. He has published articles on all kinds of topics in leading journals for general science, political science, and psychological science, including Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Not going to lie, I never even heard of that. American Political Science Review, American Journal of Political Science, and much, much more. Dr. Perez is a full professor at UCLA. So I got a bunch of questions for you, as you see, as I threw out on the way out the door. Probably one of the most pervasive ones, cheating. A lot of people think there's funny business. Even Rachel Maddow has spoken on it on her show. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so, I mean, the fraud or cheating allegation, I mean, this is sort of a direct function of former President Trump making this a thing in the 2020 elections aftermath when he clearly lost, right? And so now, you know, I think this was sort of part of the criticism, like, how could you violate such a norm? Because
I mean, I get that, because one of the first things I said is I don't want to be him running around saying stop the steal. But at the same time, if there was ever a group of folks positioned to hack an election, it's Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and the tech bros for Trump, right? And some of the patterns of redness do not look normal.
Yeah. So the way I would characterize it is what they did this time, and what I mean by they is the Republicans, is instead of reacting to the results of an election, they were laying the groundwork to contest a victory And so, yeah, you sort of named some of the cast of characters that are involved in this. You know, the example I like to use is, if you have a sport like baseball, right, there's rules, but some of those rules get bent with the goal of trying to win at all costs. And so this is what the Republican Party has done actually before Trump, right? Because we had something similar back in 2000 when Gore narrowly lost the election, and the election was given to the first.
You mean when Gore punked out on standing up for himself and delivered us to Trump?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in 2020, you had a different party and a different sort of reaction, which is, no, I am going to cry about losing this election, however narrowly, right? And so the narrow loss in either case, is part of what makes this so complicated, part of what makes it so easy to either engage in this trickery or at the very least allege that it is happening, right? And so that's complicated because we're in a different space now. We know the rules, but we know that they can get suspended. We know that they can get broken. And, it's sort of a free-for-all, right? And that's sort of what's alarming, I think, to many individuals in the know, that we're sort of starting to break down as far as, well, how are we going to play this game every 4 years, right?
Right.
Some of the problem here is both parties aren't really functioning as parties anymore. They're being hijacked by well-organized political interests. I mean, right? So if you remember...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your point.
Oh, what I was going to say, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, right, a lot of what people were saying, oh, my God, he's going to lose money, he's going to run it into the ground. He did all that. But he also has a platform to basically circulate and disseminate this sort of warped way of viewing what the American life is for us, right? So he's not that dumb in the sense that he bought it knowing full well that he wasn't going to make money off of it, but his goal was to have another megaphone for right-of-center candidates like Donald Trump.
I mean, we've already seen reports that the algorithm was skewed towards pro-Trump messages and conservative messaging. And it's not just a skewed way, in my opinion. It's a lot of lying and misinformation. So actually his investment paid off because his net worth went up, $24 billion in the week after the election. So apparently, he like you said, he wasn't as dumb. But clearly we can see that misinformation and disinformation did play a role here, and it sounds like you're saying, where's normal now?
Yeah, so it's a huge, to the misinformation point, I want to tie that back to the conversation we had about Latino voters being low information voters, right? So with misinformation being rife, it's very hard to tell, even for a very smart person, what is real from what is fake, what is misleading, what is accurate. Now imagine that you typically don't pay attention to politics, that when you do pay attention to politics, it's at a very shallow surface level. Mm-hmm. And now, as long as anyone with a camera or a microphone says something smart, that sounds smart, and that there's no alternative viewpoint to what they say, it shouldn't be a mystery that some of these individuals are influenced, are persuaded by misinformation and disinformation. And here we are literally falling asleep at the wheel. There have been extensive documented flows of misinformation, specifically in Spanish language media, right? So while everyone is worrying about, what the majority of the white public, how they deal with misinformation, you have segments of the populace that all they ever get is exposure to misinformation. And this is a structural problem. If you look, you might say, well, why don't Latinos sort of access credible information? They don't have that many options. Their primary option is Univision. And Univision's content is primarily entertainment-based. It has a very, very narrow slice dedicated to public affairs. So there really isn't that many alternatives for these individuals to get their information from, except word on the street or any recommendations about WhatsApp about YouTube, about Instagram, about Twitter, etc., and it's unregulated or lightly regulated. So, we're in deep trouble.
And it's about to be more lightly regulated. I mean, the FCC chair is the choice for the FCC chair is already set, and the president-elect has already said they're going to get rid of the so-called prejudice against conservative viewpoints in big tech. So that's a really interesting point, because who's paying attention among regulators to what misinformation is circulating in Spanish language circles?
Yep. It is going to get worse before it actually gets better, because if we're not monitoring to the extent that we'd like, misinformation that is highly visible and widely available to the average American, think about what's going on in these sort of like hidden outlets that are reaching non-English speakers, because it's not just Latinos who are sort of have exposure to this. It's also a lot of Asian American population.
Yeah.
And the kinds of messages that they get there are wildly off base, right? I mean, this is where a lot of Latinos in particular get this sort of talking point about, when these illegal immigrants come, all they got to do is hop on a hotline, make a call, they get an apartment, they get free food. But who does that? They don't do that, right? But it's circulating there. No one is contesting it. No one is saying, have you ever thought that it might be X, Y, or Z? And so people run with very flimsy messages, and they use them as justifications to, say, well, this is why I hate Black people and Latino people and Asian people, et cetera, right?
Yeah, a lot of great points there. When we continue, a couple things I would love to have you address. You mentioned Democrats and their base. And when I talk about their base, I'm talking about Black people, Latinos, poor people, which apparently the word to say poor people is some kind of a, taboo for the Democratic Party. You only can say middle class. So, during all of the self-flagellation and analysis that's going on, it seems like everyone's running over to the right. Even Morning Joe is trying to kiss the ring. Wonder what your thoughts are about that in terms of, the course correction the Democratic Party is going to make, if any at all. I wanted to ask you about this idea of the whole MAGA movement having the features of a cult. And if we have time, I definitely would love to get your basic definitions of fascism and oligarchy, things that are being thrown around. And now Republicans are saying, stop calling us fascists, as if that was just like a mean word or a cuss word, as opposed to an ideological theory that actually has a specific definition. A lot to talk about. KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Medicare open enrollment is here, and it's a time you can make changes to your health coverage. Yet, watch out for enrollment and marketing scams. Remember, Medicare will neither call you nor solicit your business. Guard your card. Never give out your Medicare number to strangers. Unsolicited calls, door-to-door visits, and emails are prohibited. Take your time. Don't feel pressured to make a quick decision. Report scams to our California Senior Medicare Patrol at 1-855-613-7080.
This season, Chevy brings classic pairings, cookies and milk, mistletoe and kisses, and your holiday plans and a new Chevy. Silverado 1500 gives you power and capability with 430 pound-feet of torque to haul your holiday tree. Equinox EV and the all-new Equinox offer award-winning quality and style to see you through the holiday season. See why Chevy makes everything better and brighter. Chevrolet, together let's drive.
If you're an adult in need of an accredited high school diploma, the Los Angeles Public Library can help. You could earn one for free in as few as 5 months, online with 24/7 access. You also get a personal academic coach, plus special training focused on 9 in-demand industries, as well as a resume and cover letter to advance your career. Visit the website at lapl.org/diploma. That's lapl.org/diploma.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality healthcare, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
I appreciate you spending the hour with us this morning, Dr. Efrén Pérez. I think I just threw out about 1 million questions, but we'll try to get to them as many of them as we can. Talk to me about the base. I feel like Democrats have this tendency to try to be Republican lights. They're always chasing this unicorn soccer mom, supposedly undecided, Liz Cheney type lady, instead of, I think, super serving the base and leaning into progressivism. What are your thoughts?
Oh my God, this is like one of the worst unforced errors in politics that I have seen continuously, and that is to basically forego revving up the people who are most reliably behind you. In order to reach out for what I think are a couple of crumbs. Here's what I mean. If you look at the electoral map of the United States, it's not a coincidence that in the states that Democrats have to win in order to reach the presidency, there is an immense concentration of loyal Black Democratic voters, right? It's also the case that in many of these states, there is also a concentration of Latino and Asian voters. The strategy for any Democrat that looks at this electoral map with a sober sort of frame of mind should really realize that it's in their interest to rev up the enthusiasm among their Black voters, among their Latino voters, among their Asian American voters. And then let's see how many of these white unicorns we're able to keep in the corral, right, in the Democratic corral. Yeah. That's not what's happening, and it's not happening. And it's really weird because it's not happening because the Democratic strategists and consultants that have been hired typically are not from these communities, don't understand these communities, but they're sitting here getting worried about attacks on the basis of identity politics, of being reverse racist. And I feel that, as Democrats, we totally have the countervailing message to that. We're just kind of gun shy about sort of putting it out there. And, we live in a kind of society now where there's massive gains in technology. What you say to the white unicorns that you want to get is not necessarily what you have to say to your Black supporters, to your Latino supporters, to your Asian American supporters, right? This is about not just messaging. It's about, what have you done for these communities lately? If you are sad about the fact that Black voters, Latino voters, and Asian American voters did not show up for you enthusiastically at record levels, that's not their fault. That is your problem as a campaign manager. You did not get out the vote among your most reliable voters. It's not complicated, right? And so now what we have is we have strategists and consultants at the top levels of the Democratic Party not fully appreciating that potential there, and at the same time tying their hands behind their back on not trying to engage in identity politics when the right has co-opted our very strategy and doing it to us, right? I don't get that part as these people get paid a ton of money, and what they got to do is put the right pieces in play, and they did not do that this last election cycle.
I saw it in 2016 too. I remember, in 2020, texting with my mom, and like, why won't Biden say city? Why won't they say city? Why won't they say poor people? Why? And it's very frustrating to me. To me, all politics is identity politics, and Republicans do identity politics better than anybody. Is it a cult? Is MAGA a cult?
Is MAGA a cult?
Yeah.
No. So like, I think cult is, I think we get frustrated. I get frustrated. I'm like, oh my God, they're like the Jim Jones people in the 70s, right? Like they're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, because things that are demonstrably untrue, they choose to believe.
Yeah. But here's the thing. This is sort of where psychology matters. What you have here is a guy that understands that for a lot of white people, there's a nostalgia for the good old days, right? When whites were the better group and all these other groups were stuck in their place, and you had to have it that way. He understands that, and he's developed a brand of republicanism that is essentially organized around these deep, nasty sentiments against a variety of outgroups. And once you identify with a group and a leader, and this is any leader, MAGA or not, you essentially follow the dictums of the group, the norms of the group, the prescriptions of the group at all costs. Because if your group loses out, it's as if you personally have lost out. So this is how people, they become very motivated to play up the kinds of things they see in politics that are good for their side and downplay things that are highly inconvenient. This isn't going away anytime soon, in part because, I'm not sure whether Trump knows that he's really good at this or not, but he's playing it to a T. He is playing it to a T. He has followers, he has supporters, and he is constantly telling them, I see you. I am fighting for you. You don't like that group? I don't like them either. I'm going to do something about it. When was the last time that we had, I would say probably like Barack Obama, right? But after that, the kinds of candidates that we've had, I think the Democrats have lost sort of that connection with their prime supporters. And so to your point, why are we overlooking the real core constituencies? Well, if we want to correct some of that, we need sort of a better way to communicate with these folks on the ground, on their terms, on the basis of the reality that they experience.
And stop trying to be Republican light. You're not going to out Trump Trump. You're not going to out Cheney. It's just to me, it's just dumb. Okay, so where? Stop calling me a fascist. What's a fascist, and what's an oligarchy?
So so an oligarchy is basically power distributed among the few. So it's a few individuals, typically men in history, who are rich, who are the captains of industry, captains of politics, and they're the ones who call the shots, right? You can make an argument that that's part of what we have in the United States, irrespective of who's in office, but it's sort of a tough sell, right? I think the way to view it is that at least if we think that there's an oligarchy happening, it's because the Republican Party under Trump has become self-organized around this sort of cast of characters that are highly, highly visible to us, right? And so whether we turn into an oligarchy, right, is to be determined come mid-January, right, when Trump enters his second term in office. Are we going to see a reconcentration of economic power, social power, political power in a few hands? Right?
And fascism. I mean, to me, what people are throwing around the word fascism, it's fair if you look at the dictionary definition of fascism and what we're being promised under the president-elect.
It is accurate. Look, fascism, if you want a better F word, it's really about a totalitarian way of running government. Totality means very few people have a say over the outcomes of the masses. That means complete control over electoral systems, complete control over news media, complete control over political appointees. So essentially undermining any checks and balances get thrown out the door, right? So, calling Trump's first presidency fascist, I think, was a fairly sort of accurate way to describe what was going on, because he concentrated a lot of the power and decision-making, which is normally given to others, under his hand, under his thumb. And he's going to do the same thing again, except it's more ramped up with his Project 2025 that he claims he's, has very little to do with and knows little about. This is sort of what's coming down the pike. And that's terrifying in some ways for a lot of people, because typically that is not how we run politics in a democracy, however imperfect it may be, right? And so, I think, I hate to speculate, but a lot of what I've been seeing is, get ready for this guy and his followers to basically short circuit a lot of democratic norms, checks, and balances.
Yeah, I was already doing it. Well, we're almost out of time here, but I'm getting a lot of questions in the chat. Do you think that many Latino voters will have buyer's remorse, the ones that went for Trump?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there is nothing realer than convincing yourself that you are not one of the Latinos that he's talking about, and then they implement something like the beginnings of a mass deportation, and guess what? This might mean your grandmother. Yeah. It might mean a close relative. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle that?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your spending the morning with us, Dr. Efrén Pérez, and I hope you'll come back again.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. I'm going to leave you with the Jesse Jackson quote. He says, at the end of the day, we must go forward with hope and not backward by fear and division. Jesse Jackson, more relevant today than ever in this moment in time. Tavis Smiley's up next. He's got a full lineup for you, so don't go anywhere. He's ready to go in on these topics and more. Don't forget to tap in on social media, KBLA 1580 on every platform. I'm there at DiPrima Radio, DiPrima, and then radio. Tomorrow we're talking reparations on a Freedman Friday. I'm Dominique DiPrima. Like my mama used to say, history is now, and we are making it together. Until tomorrow, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley criticized President-elect Trump's cabinet picks. The former presidential candidate spoke Wednesday on her SiriusXM show Nikki Haley Live, calling Tulsi Gabbard a Chinese sympathizer and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a liberal Democrat with no healthcare background. Ukraine claims Russia launched an intercontinental ballistic missile at Dnipro, but a Western official says it was a regular ballistic missile. The Ukrainian Air Force tracked the launch as an ICBM. Elton John's Tammy